Thank you for joining us. My name is Catherine Baxey. Today we're going to be looking at some of the key proposals in the government's consultation on legal aid reform published in November last year. The paper sets out potentially radical changes that the government says are designed to ensure that legal aid is targeted at those most in need. It comes at a time when the country is facing serious financial challenge. As part of the government's programme to reduce the fiscal deficit, the Ministry of Justice has to reduce its £9 billion budget by 23%. The legal aid budget has to deliver savings of £350 million. These reforms are naturally geared towards achieving this. To discuss the potential problems of the proposals for the public, the profession, and for access to justice, and to consider the Law Society's response, I'm joined by Andrew Kaplan, who's a consultant at Able Solicitors and chair of the Law Society's Access to Justice Committee, and by Richard Miller, head of legal aid policy at the Law Society. Andrew, I'd like to start by asking you to briefly outline some of the main proposals.
Well, there's going to be great changes in legal aid, great changes in the way that the legal aid system is run in this country and who's eligible for it. It's going to be bad news for practitioners, for the legal aid practitioners, solicitors who have actually looked after clients for many years. It's going to be even worse news for clients because there's going to be a real access to justice problem in this country. The main areas that the government are thinking of is firstly cutting scope. That means the number of cases which actually can be funded by the legal aid system. Some things which are currently funded will no longer be funded. Secondly, there's going to be a change in financial eligibility, which will mean that some people who are in scope, their cases actually are covered by the legal aid system, will no longer actually be able to get legal aid because they will be financially ineligible. Thirdly, there's going to be cuts to fees, and that's bad news for the profession because there hasn't been an increase in fees for many, many years. I don't think this millennium actually. Fourthly, they're suggesting some form of telephone gateway, which will be the first port of call in many circumstances for people taking civil legal aid advice. And finally, they're realising that there's going to be an access to justice problem about bringing some further funding into the system. But those ideas for further funding really don't add up.
Richard, the funding of many family cases will see significant changes. Can you talk us through those proposals?
What the government is proposing is that all family private law work will be taken out of scope unless there is domestic violence or a forced marriage in the case. And this has a number of problems. First of all, there is a very narrow definition being used for domestic violence. This trigger will only apply if there have been injunction proceedings, or there is an existing order, or there have been criminal proceedings relating to violence against the family. This is a much narrower definition than the ACPO definition that is usually accepted in government circles. Even on its own terms, the test omits a number of important situations, such as where there has been an undertaking given rather than there being an injunction order in place. And secondly, it doesn't cover the situation where there are criminal proceedings underway, but that there is no conviction as yet. So those are some serious omissions that would mean many victims of domestic violence would not get the benefit of this exception, even though clearly this is what the government intends here. There are a number of other problems with the restrictions for family funding. Where the court makes a Rule 9.5 order, which means there is a dispute between parents about the child, but the court has serious concerns about the child's welfare, in those cases funding will be available for the child's solicitor, but there will still be no funding for the parents in those cases, despite the fact that the court is looking at serious concerns about the parent's behaviour and its effect on the child. There will still be funding available for mediation, but the question remains, for those cases that are not suitable for mediation, or where mediation breaks down and does not deliver an outcome, what are those clients supposed to do after that? Because there will be no further funding for them. They will either become litigants in person within the court system, or they will be left without any remedy at all.
And a number of other large areas of law are being taken out of scope. What are they?
There are several areas that are coming out of scope completely, including clinical negligence, education, employment, debt cases unless the client's home is at risk, and many cases in the housing field and also in asylum. in immigration, non-asylum immigration work will be coming out of scope entirely, except for circumstances where the client is in detention. And the government is also proposing to take out of scope the work on asylum support, which is where an asylum seeker has nowhere to stay and is sleeping on the streets and is looking for accommodation. So there's a large number of areas there that are coming out of scope entirely, and we believe there will be many cases there where serious injustice is caused as a result.
And Andrew, why are these cuts so bad?
There's two reasons, really. I think the first reason is that people will not be able to exercise legal rights that they used to be able to exercise because legal aid will not be available, because so many areas will be cut out of scope that they'll have no legal redress. What you end up with is a situation where if you have the money, you might actually have redress. If you don't have the money, you don't have access to the courts, you can't enforce legal rights and obligations. I mean, the other downside, of course, is for practices of solicitors who for many years at very low rates have actually looked after members of the community, and then suddenly they find that areas of work that they used to do they won't be able to get paid for anymore. And of course the result of that will be is that many will go out of business, which will mean there'll be less people able actually to help people with legal problems even on a voluntary basis. It's bad news all round.